The story of the Israel War cannot be told in a single moment of violence. It is a saga, centuries in the making, layered with faith, empire, exile, survival, and ambition. To understand the flames that burn today, one must travel back through time to the days when Jerusalem was a crossroads of civilizations, to when conquerors and prophets alike wrote its fate upon stone tablets and parchment scrolls. For Jews, this land is the ancestral homeland, the promised inheritance of their forefathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is the soil of Solomon's temple, of exile to Babylon, of Roman legions scattering them across continents, and of centuries of longing expressed in prayers uttered at dawn and at dusk, next year in Jerusalem. For Palestinians, the land is equally sacred. It is where their families have tilled soil, harvested olives, and raised children for centuries. For Muslims, Jerusalem is the third holiest city, the place from which Prophet Muhammad is said to have ascended to heaven. Christians, too, see it as the land of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. And so, every stone in Jerusalem, every field in the West Bank, every alleyway in Gaza carries meaning beyond mere geography. In the late 19th and early 20th century, when nationalism swept through Europe, Zionism was born, a movement for Jewish self-determination and return to their ancient homeland. By then, Palestine was under Ottoman rule. Jews began migrating, buying land, building settlements, but they were not moving to empty plains. Arabs already lived there, and tensions grew between newcomers and locals. World War I brought the Ottomans' collapse, and Britain took over Palestine under a League of Nations mandate. The British promised Jews a homeland in the Balfour Declaration of 1917, while simultaneously assuring Arabs of independence. These conflicting promises laid the foundation of a conflict that has never been fully resolved. By 1947, after the horrors of the Holocaust, the United Nations proposed partitioning Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. Jews, desperate for refuge and self-rule, accepted. Arabs rejected it, arguing it was unjust to displace the native majority. When Israel declared independence in May 1948, Arab states invaded. A brutal war followed. Israel survived, but in the process, more than 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled, becoming refugees in camps across Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Gaza. Palestinians call it the Nakba, the catastrophe, a wound that still bleeds today. 2 decades later, in 1967, another war erupted. In just 6 days, Israel captured East Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza, and the Golan Heights. For Palestinians, this meant military occupation. For Israel, it meant security, but also the burden of ruling over another people. The occupation sparked resistance. In the late 1980s, Palestinians launched the First Intifada, or uprising, marked by stone-throwing youths facing Israeli soldiers in the streets. It was a cry against checkpoints, land seizures, and daily humiliations. The world watched as television screens broadcast the struggle of a stateless people. Attempts at peace flickered, but rarely caught fire. The Oslo Accords in the 1990s promised a Palestinian state alongside Israel. Leaders shook hands on the White House lawn. For a brief moment, hope stirred. Yet settlements expanded, extremists on both sides undermined trust, and the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in 1995 by a Jewish nationalist dealt a blow to fragile optimism. The Second Intifada in the early 2000s brought waves of suicide bombings in Israeli cities and crushing military responses in Palestinian towns. Hatred deepened. Out of this cycle emerged Hamas, a militant Islamist group based in Gaza. It presented itself not only as a resistance force, but also as a social movement, providing schools, clinics, and aid. In 2006, Hamas won Palestinian elections, shocking the world. By 2007, it had seized full control of Gaza from its rival Fatah. Israel and Egypt responded with a blockade, sealing Gaza's borders, restricting movement of goods and people. Gaza became one of the most densely populated and isolated places on Earth. For years, periodic flare-ups erupted, Hamas firing rockets, Israel responding with airstrikes. Civilians on both sides lived under constant fear. But nothing compared to October 7, 2023. In a carefully planned assault, Hamas militants stormed into southern Israel at dawn. They breached fences, poured into towns, killed over 1,000 civilians, and took hostages back into Gaza. it was Israel's deadliest day since its founding. The shock reverberated across the nation. For Israelis, it was proof that Hamas posed an existential threat. For Palestinians, it was a desperate, if horrifying, act against years of siege and occupation. The world was split, horror at the killings, but also recognition of the despair that fueled them. Israel's response was swift and overwhelming. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared the country at war. Bombs rained down on Gaza, leveling entire neighborhoods. The military cut off food, water, fuel, and medicine. A complete siege was imposed. The logic was clear: destroy Hamas, no matter the cost. But in a strip of land where 2.3 million people live shoulder to shoulder, civilians became the main victims. Hospitals collapsed under the weight of the wounded. Families buried loved ones in mass graves. Children searched the rubble for their parents. The United Nations called it a humanitarian catastrophe. Weeks turned into months. Israeli ground forces pushed into Gaza, first in the north, then deeper south. Battles were fierce. Hamas fighters used tunnels to ambush troops. Israel destroyed vast swaths of infrastructure in return. Casualties mounted on both sides, but the asymmetry was striking. Tens of thousands of Palestinians perished, most of them civilians, while Israel also mourned soldiers and the hostages still held in captivity. The war spread beyond Gaza. Hezbollah in Lebanon began firing rockets at northern Israel. Israel struck back, and by 2024 launched a full-scale incursion into southern Lebanon. Iran's shadow grew larger, accused of funding and arming both Hamas and Hezbollah. For the United States, the war became both a diplomatic and strategic challenge, supporting Israel while facing global outrage over civilian casualties. Other world powers, the EU, Russia, China, entered the debate, each aligning with different narratives and interests. Inside Israel, the war stirred both unity and division. Many demanded absolute destruction of Hamas. Others feared the country was losing its moral compass, condemning indiscriminate bombardment. In Gaza, Palestinians endured hunger, thirst, and displacement. Aid convoys trickled in, but never enough. Diseases spread in crowded shelters. The war became a war of survival, not just for combatants, but for ordinary men, women, and children. As the war dragged on into 2024 and 2025, exhaustion set in. Ceasefires were negotiated, broken, and renewed. Hostage exchanges brought moments of relief, yet many remained in captivity. Finally, in early 2025, under heavy international pressure, Israel and Hamas accepted a fragile ceasefire. But a ceasefire is not peace. It is only the absence of war, a pause in the violence. Today, the war has left Gaza in ruins. Entire neighborhoods are gone. Schools, mosques, and hospitals have been reduced to dust. Rebuilding could take generations, if it happens at all under blockade. In Israel, the October 7th trauma is etched into the national psyche. Families still light candles for the dead, still demand answers from a government they feel failed them. Across the Middle East, anger simmers, fueling extremism and reshaping alliances. What comes next is uncertain. Some foresee escalation or regional war pulling in Iran and the United States, setting the Middle East ablaze. Others predict stalemate, Hamas weakened but not eliminated, Gaza devastated, and Israel more isolated. A few still dream of breakthrough, that from the ashes of destruction, leaders may finally recognize that neither side can destroy the other and that coexistence is the only way forward. But history offers sobering lessons. Every war in this land has ended without resolution, leaving seeds of future conflict. Peace will require courage that has been rare, empathy that has been buried, and vision that transcends generations of bloodshed. Israelis and Palestinians remain to peoples bound by tragedy, tied to a strip of land, too small for the weight of their dreams, yet too sacred to abandon. The Israel war, like those before it, is not only about territory, it is about identity, memory, survival. Until its wounds are healed, until justice, security, and dignity are offered to both peoples, the world will continue to live in its shadow. And history will continue to whisper its warning, that without peace, war is not an event. It is a cycle, one that returns again and again, until the voices of the dead outnumber the living, who can still make a different choice.